Hi and welcome to PolyOriginals with Fiona Abel-Smith. So for today's tutorial we're going to have a lot of fun and we're going to make some really sweet little trinket bowls using the Trinket cane. And I've called it this for no other reason than I'm using it to make trinket bowls, but it gives you a way of mentioning it or recognising it if you want to talk about it. And I like to give my canes a name and nothing else came to mind, so Trinket cane it is. Now, according to this one, the magic of polymer clay. Why is it magical? Because the great thing about polymer clay is just the teeniest, tiniest bit of tweaks will take you from one pattern to another, from one sort of orientation of a pattern to another, and I'll sort of show that as we go all the way through. But these are done with exactly the same cane, just slightly tweaked. So I posted on social media examples of bowl 1 and examples of bowl 2 and asked you which one you wanted me to do, and I've decided to do for you both of them. Why not? So I will concentrate mainly on bowl 1, but I will also show you how to put the cane together to create this look as well. So that's why it makes it magical, because you can just have so much fun with it and really enjoy creating your pieces. This is a step-by-step tutorial. I do talk all the way through it because I want you to learn how to do polymer clay and I want you to be able to create something exactly the same as I do. So I'll give you tips throughout, show you how I do the whole thing. So let's get started, let's have some fun, and we'll go through the equipment you need for today's session. The equipment I'm using is fairly standard for polymer clay work. I use a polymer clay blade. I sometimes refer to this as a tissue blade, and in actual fact I've got two, because I have one that I keep to one side which is incredibly sharp and I only use for slicing canes, and I have this little bit of tape on it just so that I know which one's which when I'm making my slices. I've got a cable needle that I just used to roll over the veneer to get it to nicely meet with the slices and also to create grooves in the cane as we're working. Something similar will work. A craft knife, a small roller. This is about 1/2 inch or 1.25 centimetres in width. Any small roller will do, and this just helps us roll the veneer at the very end. When we're creating our nice smooth veneer, I've got a couple of sheets of wax paper, and these are just big enough to fit the size of my veneer on. If you don't have wax paper, then tracing paper, baking parchment, baking sheet, anything along those lines will do. It just helps to protect the clay when we're running over the top of the veneer to make it nice and smooth, and I do that with the stainless steel soap. Any form of burnishing tool will work, and the wonderful Melanie Muir in a workshop once showed those of us who were there that she uses a nice smooth pebble, so again that would work. I attach the wax paper to my measuring sheet with a little bit of masking tape just to keep it nicely secure when I'm working on it, and I use at least one measuring sheet as I'm going along, and this one is freely downloadable from www.printablepaper.net. So I've got a couple there, and I've also got a laminated sheet where I have drawn myself out a line of the hexagons, so it's 60 degrees on each of these. So whether you need a protractor or whether you can download something, just something that you can then work on, and this is just something that I've laminated to make it easier to use. And the same with these, I laminate these so that I can use them multiple times, and this one is the 4 squares to 1 inch one, but you can download it in centimetres if you prefer. I use a pasta machine dedicated to polymer clay use. If you don't have a pasta machine, then you can simply stack layers of playing cards either side of your clay, the right height, and then roll over the top to get the right thickness. And I'll put details of all the thicknesses of the clay you need in the details below this video. There are various things you can use as moulds for your piece and to make your little trinket dish. Have a look around your house. You can use ceramic bowls, and they work out quite well, but try and make sure they've got completely flat bottoms. If they haven't, then you can do it on the inside of a bowl rather than putting it on the underneath of a bowl, which is what I do when I show you the process. There's some nice small stainless steel bowls. You can get these from Ikea, and I'll put a link to those in the details below for you. And I've also got a larger stainless steel bowl, and this one I got from Lidl. And what I've done with this one, because I use this one quite a lot, and you can see here I've still got the impression of when I used it, and I haven't yet cleaned it off, so I will do that before I actually put a new bowl on top. And what I did was, with a Sharpie, I raised something up the right height I wanted, and then just moved the bowl round so I got that nice line, and then I carefully measured all the way around the edge and put it into 6 equal pieces just with a piece of card so I could then do the lines. And as you can see with the marks that are left from that bowl that I originally have, I then get the hexagon points in line with the marks, and I can see when I pull it down that it's roughly even all the way around, and adjust it until it is. So that's something I like to do, but obviously I use this for polymer clay all the time. This is an indelible Sharpie marker, but you can just do the same with something that you can clean off afterwards. The other thing I use to make the hexagon bowls is this. This is actually a slump mould, and I haven't used this in the one I'm showing you for the main tutorial because these are quite expensive to buy. Again, I'll put a link in the details below as to where I get mine from, and you can get them in a variety of shapes and sizes, and I like this one just for doing the little trinket bowls. You can see here it's quite white. That is because I use corn flour or cornstarch over the whole thing every time I use it, and it just sticks slightly to the side, but I also put it over the top. The other thing is, as with any form that isn't metallic, glass or ceramic, you need to check that it's going to be okay in the oven. Now I put this one in by itself, tented the whole thing with aluminium foil and tested it in my oven at the temperature I was going to bake at first to make sure that it was oven safe. For me, this one worked fine. There's no odour when I bake it, and it's absolutely fine, and I've used it several times. However, as always, I always tent in aluminium foil just to protect the clay whilst it is baking in the oven. But not all slump mould forms are the same, so you would need to check that it was okay in the oven first. Safety first, don't put anything in that's going to burn or going to emit odours or some form of chemical that is bad for you. So there's various options there for moulds you can use, so just choose whichever one you have to hand. I have biodegradable wet wipes that I use to clean my hands and equipment as I go along, and just a couple of clean facial tissues just to wipe over any wetness of the surface if I've used the wet wipes. To finish my pieces, I do hand sanding and polishing, and for the hand sanding I use the wet dry sandpaper. I use 600 grit, 1000, 1500 and 2000. Always wear rubber gloves because you don't want to be cutting yourself on the sandpaper or giving yourself sandpaper burns. And when I work, I either work in a basin or in a bowl of water, and then before I release the water I always put a square of cotton or some form of linen, very fine weave, so that as the particles are collected in the water, so they then are collected on top of the cotton so they don't go into the water system. Once they're dry, you can then scrape them into a pile and dispose of them safely. To polish, I use one of the handheld machines. I happen to use a Dremel, but any of the makes will work well, and I use the unstitched polishing mops put into them. That's one that's brand new, hasn't been used. That's one that's been used a fair bit, so you can see after a while they do sort of get used and worn, so then you need to replace them. And also, when you're doing any form of polishing, you may not realise it, but very fine particles of the polymer clay do get rubbed off the surface, so please always wear a mask. And it's not just the clay, but if you're using one of these, little bits of the filaments of these sort of flick off as well. So safety first. Most people nowadays do have masks, so always wear one when you're polishing. So there we go, that's all the equipment, so let's move on to the clay. The polymer clay I'm using today is Fimo Soft, but all well-known and recognised brands of polymer clay will work equally well for this technique. The cane is basically made from one big blend between all of these colours, with some inserts and then some backing colour. We've got white, mint, peppermint, Pacific blue, emerald, and then the Windsor blue, and I've kept all the colours towards the greeny blue side of the spectrum. The little inserts, we've gone plum, lilac and white, and then I've got some additional white and some additional Windsor blue to put as a backing, and I like to choose the lighter colour ends of the blend and the darker colour ends of the blend to have as the backing colours, but of course you can choose whatever colours you like and have whatever colours you like as an insert or as the backing colours. As I showed you at the start, we are going to be making a trinket dish, so I need quite a large cane to be able to have that amount of clay to use, hence that we've got large amounts of colours, and I'll go through the amounts in just a second. If you didn't want to do that, if you just wanted to make the cane and use something else, then simply use half of these amounts and then just half everything I do as we go through the process. So for the amounts of clay, we've got half an ounce or 14 grams of all of these, and then a quarter an ounce or 7 grams of these three. So the first thing I'm going to do is condition all of my clay, and when I condition my clay I use the medium setting of my pasta machine, and on my pasta machine 0 is thick, 9 is thin, and I condition on setting number 3. The other thing to mention, just putting those to one side before we start with the blend, is that this is a lot of clay. So for the majority of people's machines, having this amount of clay to try and do as a single skinner blend will actually be sort of too big and be too wide and too unwieldy for the pasta machine that you are using. I happen to have a 180 Atlas machine, which is just 3 centimetres wider than the normal pasta machine. So for me, doing this isn't too bad, but I would recommend, unless you have one of the big Lucy Clay machines or one of the lovely big pasta machines, perhaps cutting this into half pieces, and this is what I will do for you to show you. So because I know most people's pasta machines are smaller than the one I'm using, we are simply going to cut this down and we will make 2 separate skinner blends in exactly the same way. So we're doing a blend with those colours, and we'll do one and then we'll do the second one in exactly the same way. So I will get those conditioned in those amounts, get myself some little rectangular sheets of the clay on setting number 3 of my pasta machine, and I'm going to make them quite tall and thin rectangles, as again that'll make it easier to go through the pasta machine. So I'll bring you back when I've got that done. So I'll put one to one side, but I'm going to repeat with the second lot exactly what we do with the first lot. I'm going to do a skinner blend across all the colours, straightforward one, so diagonally cut down the 2 end pieces and then straight down the middle ones. Double them up. And then put them together. And hopefully this should be thin enough to fit through most people's pasta machines. As you noticed, when I conditioned them, I ended them up with quite long rectangular shapes, and I did that on purpose so that we'd only have the thin stripes, so that they would easily fit through the pasta machine. Give them a quick roll to make sure all the pieces adhere. And then, as we normally do, I'm going to fold bottom to top and put it back through the pasta machine, fold first, to get the nice skinner blend. If you're new to skinner blends, I do have a video tutorial and I'll put a link to that in the details below this one for you. But we're going to put it through, and each time it comes through we're going to fold bottom to top, always with the dark blue on one side, the white on the other side, or whatever colours you are using, and keep folding and putting it through until we end up with a nice blend from one side through to the other. And because I've now have 4 thicknesses of clay, I'm going to go 1 thickness thicker on my pasta machine. So I conditioned it on setting 3, so for me I'll be putting it through on setting number 2. As you can see, we start to get the stripe pattern as we go through, and each time all I'm doing, as I said, is just folding it bottom to top. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to swap the camera view over so that you can see the pasta machine, so you can see me doing the blend and then see me doing the next bit. So as you can see here, we're getting a nice blend through from one side to the other. You'll also notice that I just swap it around. So 1 minute I've got the blue on this end, then each time I go through I'll switch the white, next time down to the blue. And the only reason you do that is because you think your rollers on your pasta machine will be completely symmetrical, but they have a tendency to either do that or do that. So if you don't do that, then you end up with an uneven piece. So we got it to the stage where we're getting the nice blend through. You'll also notice that as I put it through, so I'm actually sort of pushing it quite hard up against this edge, because I'm reducing the width of it. Because what we're doing, we actually want to end up with some really quite small widths for our piece. So I'm just doing it automatically as I do the blending and just pushing it to one side as I go, just to start getting myself. So I've got probably about half the width of the pasta machine, and for me, remember, mine is a big machine, a 180, so yours will probably be about, most people's is about down to this height. So say about half the width of the pasta machine would be good, and all I'm doing is I'm just very gently just pushing it slightly towards this side as we go, and then we'll change the shape more radically in just a moment. Okay, we've got a size now that is quite a decent length, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to chop this into 2 pieces to give myself an easier size of piece to work on. What I'm looking for in the end is 5 pieces about 2 inches or 5 centimetres long and about 1.5 inches or about 4 centimetres wide. And to do it in a piece this big is quite difficult. And what I've found is that it's easier to get a piece where I can get 3 pieces out and 2 pieces. So I'm looking for something that's roughly about 1/3, 2/3. And I'll take one piece and work on that and do the other piece in just a moment. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to force this slightly narrower. So I'm going to put it together so it matches, as we normally do, pinch along the bottom to make sure there's no air trapped. And then I'm going to concertina it by pressing it in with my thumb and fingers, first at the bottom and then across the top. Okay, so you can see I've effectively squashed it up. So now when I put it back through, I can either use my thumb, and I'm using my thumb and I'm keeping it, as you can see, well away from, here's the rollers all the way down here, so my thumb's a long way up. If you don't want to do that, you can put magnets in your machine and just move them along to restrict the amount of place that the clay can go through. You can also use just a pack of ordinary clay. So for instance, you could just put it there and just let it sit there, and again that would restrict the width. But because I tend to do things quite quickly, I will just leave my thumb. So all I'm doing is I'm just making sure that as I turn the handle, and I'll do it slowly for you, I'm just literally just holding that in place and letting it go through. So now we have a narrower piece, and I'm going to carry on doing that until I've got a thickness, as I say, it's about 1.5 inches, about 4 centimetres wide. The next thing I'm going to do is, my pasta machine is still on setting number 2, so I'm going to put it up on setting number 1. I'm going to turn the handle a couple of times just to make sure there's no mess there, and then either up in the air or in the machine, just concertina it again and again, just use my thumb, and I will repeat that until I've got a nice long thin strip. I'm also going to go up to setting 0 in a moment, which is my thickest setting on the pasta machine, so that I get as thick a strip as I can, but a nice long thin piece. So as I said, there's the sort of size I was looking for, so about 1.5 inches wide, about 4 centimetres, and at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, I've got more than enough going along in that direction. So that's great for that piece. I'm now going to repeat exactly the same as I did for that piece, and then I'm also going to repeat exactly the same for my second set of colours. So I will end up with 4 strips, this sort of width and varying lengths depending on the amount of sizes that I have cut off. There are all our pieces. That was blend 1 and that was blend 2, and I've got sufficient length for what I need, so I'm going to put blend 2 to one side for a moment and just work on blend 1, and I'm just going to neaten this off till I get the sizes that I want. So I wanted 3 from this, and I said I'm going for 2 inches. You can do whatever you want to do, but that worked well for what I was doing when I was doing this as a practice. So first thing to do is cut off my 3 lengths, put little pieces to one side. If you find that you don't have quite enough length between, say one's not quite 3 and the other one's just 2 and a bit, you can always patch your skinner blends together and cut another piece out of that if you need to. Next thing I'm going to do is just neaten along the white edge, and then neaten along the dark edge as well. And I will keep my cut-offs to one hand because we can use those for inserts later if we run out of light colour or dark. So having done that, I'll put the 3 pieces to one side. Repeat for these next 2 out of this one, and then repeat with the other blends, so I end up with 5 from each of the 2 blends. There's my blend 1, there's my blend 2, and here's some of the additional colours we had at the start when I told you about the amount of clay we needed. So all I've done is I've conditioned this amount into get myself a thin sheet, and the same with that one. And I do like to use the colours that are on the light end of a blend and on the dark end of the blend. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this through setting number 9, so for me my thinnest setting on my pasta machine, and then simply set the pieces on and then cut out so they've got a thin layer of white down one side of them, and then exactly the same with this one. So this side will have blue, this side will have white, and I'll fast forward through that for you. When I pick them up, I make sure if there's any air bubbles on the back, just to brush them out slightly with my fingers. And I've been quite careful with the white because I want to use this white later on, so I've been trying to make sure I don't get too much of the other colours on it. Next thing to do is to create our little inserts, and I'm going to use the plum, the lilac and the white for this, and I'm going to surround it by some of the offcuts of the dark blue. I'm going to do another Skinner blend because I just like the merging and the blending of one colour to another. If you don't want to do that, then you could simply roll up one of the colours, either start with the white in the middle or the dark purple in the middle, and then layer that round it and that round the outside to create a bullseye cane. Either way works well. But because I'm used to doing Skinner blends and I like that nice blending of colours, that's what I'm going to do for this one. So same as before, put them together, little roll to make sure nicely adhered, fold in half and put back through setting number 2 of the pasta machine, and I'll put that through until I have a nice blend and bring you back when I got to that stage. Once you've got a nice blend going, either cut or fold it in half, pinch across the end and put back through the darkest colour first on the same setting, setting number 2, so you end up with a longer, thinner strip. And then you need the longest, thinnest piece you can get. So for me, that's going straight down to setting number 9 on my machine. But if you know that your machine shreds or tears your clay, simply go down one setting at a time until you get to your longest, thinnest setting on your pasta machine. So there we have the clay. And all I'm going to do now is I'm going to roll it from the dark end up to the light, trying to make sure there's no air trapped as I go. I will then take some of the dark clay, put it through the pasta machine until I've got a sheet that's roughly the same width as the height of my cane, and then put it through my thinnest setting and just wrap one layer around just to give me an outer layer of the dark blue. Having got our little insert cane ready, what I'm going to do now is reduce this, and by reducing I'm pressing in whilst at the same time pulling it longer. Because it's a very simple round pattern with just the colour going darker in the middle, we can roll this and it's not going to distort the pattern at all, so that is fine. And I'm going to roll it, and as I'm rolling, so I'm pulling with my fingers coming outwards. And once it gets to a reasonable length, I'm going to cut it in half and just work on half at a time, because I want this to be long enough to fit across each of my segments. So put them out so that the lines are horizontal to you, and then just keep rolling this and making it smaller until it's big enough to fit across the whole of those slices. I've actually gone slightly longer, and that's quite good because it should give us enough to add an extra piece in if we need to. I've tried to make sure it's fairly even along the length because I'm going to be doing a kaleidoscope cane. If you're not kaleidoscoping yours, then you don't need to worry about it being even either. But once we've got it going, drop off until we get to see the pattern on the inside. And then just chop 5 pieces the right length. Put the extra piece on one side for a moment. And then I'm just going to put these down completely random places along my slices. And I'm not pressing them in, so we can always change them later when we start to put those slices together. I'm then going to repeat exactly the same with this for these next 5 slices. Starting on one section of your 5 at a time, just pick them up, and I've got it so that the white is facing towards me, and I'm just going to put them up and slightly move that over. So can you see I've got a slight diagonal there. I don't want these too regular, the inserts, so I'm going to pull that one over there. So this is why we hadn't pressed them in at the time, so you can change them however you want them. Put him there. And let's put him over there on the end. And then I'm just going to press them together slightly to make sure there's not too much in the way of air gaps. So we've got a weird sort of diamond looking shape, and then I'm going to repeat with those. So there are our 2 main elements. We've also got some leftover blue, some leftover white, and those 2 end pieces. And this is where we can really start to make the magic, and you can decide which way you want your pattern to be orientated. I showed you at the start the 2 different distinct patterns, and that was because I put them together very slightly differently when I put them into a triangular stage. And you can see there's not a lot of difference, but this one, which was the more triangular of the ones, they were both very much sort of kept the same sort of shape, whereas in number 1, one of them got quite squashed in the middle. We've also got the extra bits we add in, one of which is white, one of which is blue, which went to the side in pattern 1, and in pattern 2 one of them went towards the corner. So those were the 2 main differences, and I have made myself up a second set and tried to put them more or less exactly the same together with the same inserts in the same places as those. So this one I'm going to do as number 1, and this one I'll show you as number 2, and then we can see how it comes out differently. So the first thing to do is, I'm going to do number 1 to start with. First thing is to decide which way round things are going to go. So I am going to put them, I think I'm going to put them that way round with the dark going down this way, and this one's going to be quite a round sort of shape, something like that. And then this one, and we'll have it so that the darker end is over here. This is going to actually curve up quite a bit, sort of make it into more of a squat sort of triangular shape. So that curls round, and that's going to sort of sit on top like there, so that when it curls round will be more of a shorter squatter shape, and this one's still going to be the longer elliptical shape. And then we've got our 2 gaps here, so we'll take the dark clay, and I'm just pushing it with my fingers to make it into a triangular shape. Okay, and we'll put that, let's put it on this side for this one, making sure it's nicely on the side still, in the way that these 2 are on the side, and then we'll do the white on the other side. We'll put him in there, and just as a last little added bit, with my cable needle I'm just going to create a circular indent so that we can add the last little leftover insert bits. We had one down there and one down there. So there's our very rough shape, and then what it's quite nice to do is just add a couple of swirls into the corners. Again, you don't have to do this, but I like to because it just creates a little bit of extra movement. So I think this one I'm going to swirl around this way, and this one, because I've got quite a peak at the top here and I want to make it slightly wider out this way, this one I'm going to curl around that way. So we'll start with this one, seeing it's already quite wide, and all I'm going to do is I'm just going to pinch it up nice and evenly across the top so it really pulls it out. And then we'll just pull this back on itself and curl that over so that we really do have a curl in that top bit, and it'll make that more squat. And then this bit, I'm just going to pull up this side coming out, so just on that top dark edge. And I want to make sure I keep that white triangle in the middle, so I'm not pulling that up. How are we doing? So it's still towards the middle, and then just tipping over just the edge, just slightly. And then the last little thing to do, if you want to, where we've got a long piece of one colour, I'm just going to create a little channel in that side, that little bit of leftover dark clay. Just make a little roll and pop him in. Just gives a little bit of added extra interest. And then something similar down this side where we've got that blue, a little bit of the rolled up cut off ends that we had from the white ends of our blends. And we'll just put him in there and take off the excess. So there we have number one. So sort of fairly flat along the bottom and more squat at the top. So let's move on to number two. So we'll do the same. We'll have number two orientated the same way with this bottom one going along here. And this one's keeping nice and elliptical. So we've got this bit here, although in actual fact I'm ignoring the fact that in the original one I put the dark there because I'm going to keep it the same just so we see the difference between these two. But obviously if you wanted to, you could have it that way around. Whatever you want to do. And then this one was going to be a longer elliptical shape going more around that way. So we had something more sort of along those lines with a larger triangular piece here and a smaller piece here. And then we will do the same as we did before, so it's our leftover dark pieces. So put those in there. And the leftover white. Put him in there. Put that one in there. And then create a little channel. Put our last little insert pieces in. So one goes into where we had the blue triangle. One goes into where we had the white triangle. And then in order to keep sort of more of this triangular shape, this time I'm going to curve the white up and over the top. Okay, so that's keeping the top of the triangle. And this time I'll curve this one down over this way. And there you see we've got more of a triangular shape with one side going down here and one side going down here, and this dark piece coming more towards the bottom of the point there. And then, as before, a little bit of the leftover dark can go against the light on this side. And the great thing about doing things like this, and again coming back to what I think is so magical about polymer clay, is however you put yours together, you will get something slightly different. So we can aim for the same sort of pattern, but it will always be slightly different. And because I've got quite a lot of light here, I'm going to actually put another piece of the dark in this side as well. Just to give us that little dot of something in the lighter sides. So same component parts, just put together. So these ones go that way, and this one's along there, and then sort of a more shorter triangular shape on top. So the next thing to do is to reduce them down, or reduce your cane down. So I'm only going to reduce the one, and this one I'll reduce off camera and just show you the results when we have the finished pattern. Reducing the cane is simply a case of pressing in along the sides in nice even motions. So I'm just starting by making sure it's nicely triangular, making sure that all my stripes are going roughly along the same line, so that when I turn it on its side and start pushing in whilst pulling at the same time, it will get longer as I go. And it's easier and better to do small, constant, continuous movements than try and reduce too much at one time. As you can see, when I'm pressing in, I'm hardly making any inroads to the clay. There's no big finger marks going in, because I'm just giving a nice even pressure all the way along. Every so often you can turn on the end and just press the ends down to make sure they're nice and flat, because that reduces any wastage. So just gently and gradually working down, and I'll continue in this way until I've got it down to a size that I'm looking for. And what I'm looking for is when the cane gets close to about 1 inch width across each of these sides, so 2.5 centimetres. And I will find, or hopefully will find, that this is more than I need. And I know from experience, to cut nice thick slices to create the veneer that I'm making, I need 7 or 8 inches in length. It's about 17.5 or 20 centimetres in length, and that'll give me enough amount that I can take thick slices to create the trinket bowl. I know I'm going to have enough if I take a small bit off at the end just to show you the pattern, so I'm just going to take a piece off about there just so that we can see what we've got. And hopefully we should see we've got the longer piece going down, which is going to create that piece around the outside, and then the smaller piece that's going to create that pattern in the middle. So I will carry on reducing that, as I say, taking it down till it's 1 inch or 2.5 centimetres in width, and I'll do that on the measuring sheet, constantly turning and pressing it until it gets to the right size. There's my finished reduced cane. As you see, I've used the measuring sheet to make sure it's the right size along the length, and I've got enough length to take off 54 thick slices. And by thick slices, I'm going sort of 3 to 4 millimetres, because when we put those together, that'll give us enough thickness to create the trinket dish that we're going for. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take off 54 slices. I will do that off camera, simply because when I do it, my head is right over the top, and all you will see is the top of my head. And I am doing slices, say, about that sort of thickness, so nice, thick, chunky slices. A couple of other things to mention. I should have said before I started slicing, but I forgot, but I will say now, I had left this to stand for a couple of hours so that it was nicely set and settled, so that there was less distortion when I chopped down through. And I do keep for myself a particularly sharp blade, which I just I've marked with a bit of masking tape so I know which one's which, and I keep a single blade just for taking slices so that it's always nice and sharp. To help create a perfect hexagon, I have marked myself just with pen a hexagon on the back of an old used measuring sheet, one that I don't use anymore because it's become too dirty to use, and on top of that I've put a little bit of wax paper big enough to take my hexagon on and just fastened it down with masking tape so it's a nice even surface for me to work on. Putting them together with a pattern like this is relatively easy to match the pieces, and I like to work on 3 pieces at a time as I build up my hexagon, but that's completely up to you. You can do 2 pieces or even 1 piece at a time, but I start from the middle and work my way out. So the first thing I need to do is put the pieces up and then decide which way round they're going to go. So I'm going to start, I think, with that piece like that, and I'm marrying them together, trying to make sure that they match, and you can sort of wiggle them around a bit until you've got a piece going. So I'm going to have this piece towards the middle, so I now know that wherever I've got the dark piece there is going to fit with the dark piece there. So those 2 pieces will go up and match those pieces there, and those 3 pieces can now sit on the wax paper ready to start. So for the next 3, I already know which place to start, so I'm going to start with those 2 together as I did before. And then if you have a quick look down, you can see that one's going to go that way, so the piece I need is going to go on this side, so I can fit that piece in. Put him up there, and then put the 2 pieces together. And you want them to get to sit as neatly as you can at this stage. And you can use your craft knife if you need to, just to manoeuvre them into space. So I've already got the rest of mine set up into the triangular pieces here, so we know how we can put them together. And I'm keeping an eye on these lines as I go. And if you've got your pieces nicely reduced down in that nice rectangular, triangular shape rather, then your pieces should fit together relatively easily. But we will finesse them in a minute, so don't worry too much. And just keep working your way around until all the pieces are nicely on. So you can pull or push them slightly if you need to rearrange them, and always making sure when you're looking at the dots and the pieces are marrying up. Having done the 3s, we've got our little bits left in between, and for these you're simply going to do packs of 2, and exactly the same as we did before. Start with the 2 centre pieces that we did, and they will fit on that side, and then the reverse, so do it with the 2 dark areas joining up, and they will fit in there. So that is how the pattern comes together, and as you can see we've got these sort of more circular bits in between the more triangular bits, and that gives us the pattern number 1. And I now have 3 ways of finessing this even more. First thing I do is with the edge of my cable needle, so not the point, just slightly down the edge, I'll go in this direction first, so all the lines which go that way, I will just roll over the joins, making sure that both of the pieces, so both sides of the clay, is nicely joined up and there's no gaps, and I roll towards the middle of each piece. So where you've got 6 slices joining, you can roll, and if you create a little raised bit, that's absolutely perfect, because we will deal with that in just a moment. And I'm quite methodical about the way I go. So I'll go down one line, then the next line, say I'm just rolling over where the slices join, just to make sure they're nicely adhering to each other and there is no gap. It's when you really start to see the pattern come together as well, when you take out all those small gaps. Having done the middle and those two lines, I will then turn it the other way up so that I can do the two on this side. And then having done that, I'll repeat to do those 5 lines and then rotate it and do the last lot. So I've gone over all of those lines and all of the individual triangles are now pressed together so there's no seams and no joins visible. Having done all that, stage 2 is just to slice off all those little bumpy bits we've made where the pieces come together. And to do that, I take my sharp blade and, holding it flat, simply shave off where the middles are. And you can go over the whole piece doing that. Having taken all the pieces, so your little tops off, so now you're left with a flat piece, the final thing is to make it lovely and flat. Now you could roll over it, and if all you've got is a roller, then that you can absolutely do. And if you do that, just make sure your roller is nice and clean, so take off any little bits of residue before you do that. However, if you have some, I use a second sheet of the wax paper, again cut to size so it fits over the top. Push it down nice and smooth so there's no crinkles, and then I burnish. So I'll burnish with something like this, the stainless steel soap, and again I'll put the details of where to get links to find those. And I just do it again very methodically, just starting in round circles. So I'm using sort of the flattish areas. I'm just going round and round and round, trying to get all the pieces as nice and even as I can get them. And because you've put the wax paper down, this is holding this in situ slightly, so it's not going to spread out as much as if you were rolling it without anything on top. And you should end up with a piece that when you run your hand over it, it just feels beautifully flat, so there's no indents. So now I'm going to just take the tape off the bottom piece with a pen. I'm just going to put a T so that I know that that is the top side, because once you start flipping this over and you've got sheets on both sides, it's difficult to remember which way is up, and then turn it upside down. And because we're doing a bowl where we're just using one slab, we want the underneath to also be very neat. So again, I'm going to go over, I'm going to burnish, and I'm going to roll all over the underside. And there we have the bottom as neat and tidy as the top. So if I put that one back up that way and we turn that one like that, so that is pattern number 1, and I've gone exactly the same all the way through that process to get pattern number 2. So in this one we can clearly see the lines that go around the more circular middle part, and of course the definition of the pattern changes slightly depending on whether you put the light to the inside or the dark. So again, that's a choice you can make when you get to that stage of putting your cane together. And pattern number 2 looks like that. So on this one you can just see we've got much more of that really equilateral triangles going on. So a couple of different ways whether you do version 1 or version 2, so that's how they come out. And of course each one will come out very slightly differently, because every variation we do and every slight change we do will change the way it looks. Here is the mould I showed you at the beginning. So this is my stainless steel bowl where I've marked the 6 lines, and I've given this a thorough clean to make sure nothing is going to stick. And then I'm going to put it so the top side is down, obviously removing the paper in a moment. So I'm just going to peel the paper off, and with the paper still on the back side, I'm going to line it up as neatly as I can. Already see I've got it too much over that way, so because I've still got it on the paper, I can fairly easily lift it off and just bring it this way a fraction. So what I'm looking at is that each time I pull down, I'm just looking to how far away these points are from the line. You're never going to get it exact, but you just want it roughly. And obviously if you want to, you can go around and measure. So it's a little bit further off this side, and I'll keep moving it till I've got it as centrally fixed as I can get it. So I went round with a ruler and I measured, and each point was roughly about 1.5 centimetres away from the line. So I'm just going to very carefully, with my finger, push from the centre point to make sure there's no trapped air underneath the centre part, and then I can gently remove the wax paper. I will work just on the points, making sure they're going down and there's no air trapped underneath towards the points that I'd marked out. And because it's a round bowl, we'll get that slight raised area. So all you do is you very gently just press that flat against the bowl until you can't see any air or any gaps. And I'm just rolling it, trying to make sure I don't leave any fingerprints, because the less marks I leave, the less sanding I have to do at the later stage. And our trinket bowl is now ready to bake, and I'll tent the whole thing in aluminium foil, making sure the foil doesn't touch the top of the bowl, and bake according to the manufacturer's instructions for the brand of clay I am using. Once cooled, simply remove your piece from your mould. It should just gently pry off. If you ever have any problems, you can just use running water to put underneath, and that should help prise it off for you. And there you have your finished little trinket dish. And it's completely up to you at this stage as to whether you do anything else with it. It has a slight sheen on it because it was sat on a metal dish, so you can just leave it exactly as it is if you want to. And there are various other things you can do if you wish. I like to sand and polish them because I think it gives the most amazing feel and also lovely shine on them, both on the top and the bottom. However, it does take a time to do. So for something this size with the grits that I showed you earlier, it will take me about half an hour per little bowl to hand sand, and then probably about 20 minutes to polish with the Dremel that I showed you. So there is time involved and there is work involved, but it does give a lovely finish. Other things you can do, you could add a varnish. Most Polymer Clay brands have their own varnish, and just simply do a layer of that. You can use Renaissance wax, and that gives you a nice finish as well. And there's loads of other things. If you have never looked into the various ways of finishing your Polymer Clay, then do have a look at the Blue Bottle Tree. Ginger Davis Allman has some amazing articles on her website, and again I'll put a link to that in the details below this one. One last tip: if you want to know what it's going to look like if it's varnished or hand sanded and polished, simply run it under some water and get it wet. However it looks like wet, that's how it will look like when it's sanded and polished. And I also know how this is going to look when it's sanded and polished because I've already done that with the other bowl. So just to show you the difference before I actually sand and polish this one, you can see here the darks, how much more it brings out the dark colours and the variation and the contrast between the two. And as you can see here, you've got that lovely shine both on the top and on the bottom, and that's through hand sanding and polishing. And that is why I like to do it. It just really brings the colours out, and you can get rid of any little imperfections that may have happened whilst you're doing it. So I'm going to go get that one sanded and polished, and I'll bring you back when I've got them both done. There we are, all finished, all sanded and polished with that lovely shine all the way around. And even though it was done on a circular base, it still has that lovely hexagon feel to it. And to be honest, it's easier to sand as well than the one using the hexagon template, which is very difficult to sand, getting into all those sharp edges and sharp sort of corners there. So 2 bowls, bowl number 1, bowl number 2. just changing the design slightly to get that different feel. And just to show you a couple of different colours and examples, this is the design from bowl 1, the one that I originally posted, and you can see here you really have got this clear sort of hexagon going around the outside. And the colours for this one, I used white, lemon, apple green, tropical green, emerald green into navy, the Windsor blue, and the insert was just purple into white, and then the normal white, and then the navy Windsor blue as the dark circles. And just to show the reason why that looks slightly different to this one, if we compare the two slices I did, so you can see they're very, very similar with the bit going up the middle and the shape. So they actually came out very, very similar in the shape, but the reason this one's got a stronger hexagon feel around the outside is simply the orientation. So on this one I had the dark going towards the middle of the triangle on that one, and the dark of this piece also going to the middle of the triangle. On this one, you see I've got the dark going towards the middle, but this one I did the light. And because that's light against dark, it gives you that different variation in this one to really give that different feel. So bear that in mind if bowl number 1 pattern is what you want to go for and you want that strong hexagonal look around the outside. And here we go with bowl design number 2. And again, this is one that I did and posted online for social media. And again, you've got this really strong triangular look. The colours for this one, I used white, mint, silver, gold, peach and bronze, and then the white and the bronze, and the middle insert bit was white into mint into emerald green. And I must admit, I really do like that colour combination as it came out. And again, the reason they look slightly different was that orientation of the pattern. So as I show here, again, the way we put them together, almost exactly the same with the white in the middle and the two shapes of the two pieces. But again, for this one, I put both the darks in the middle, whereas this one of the darks went in the middle, and then the other one, the lights, went towards the middle. And it just gives that, again, this different variation between the light part of the triangles and the dark. Whereas this one, you get more of sort of like a central circular pattern, because you've got the darks against the darks. So again, choices you make, and each choice gives you a slightly different outcome. And for anyone who may still be struggling to get nice neat veneers and nice neat bowls, I do have a bowl tutorial on Etsy where I add a few additional tips and a few sort of techniques to get a really pristine finish. And as always, I'll put the details of that below this video for you. And just in case you thought all that making the canes and creating the veneer and everything else was too much like hard work, I do have some veneers for sale already made, and these are in my Etsy shop. And these are just some of the ones that I have available at the moment. So you could always just get these and make your own bowl using these. Obviously at the moment they're covered over by the wax paper just to keep them nice and pristine. But you can have a look through and see if there's any that you like. So that's it. That's the end of the tutorial today, and I hope you enjoyed that one. I hope you have lots of fun, whether you do design 1, design 2, and depending on how you orientate your cane, and create lots of wonderful trinket canes and trinket bowls using the magic of polymer clay. Thank you so much for watching. As always, a special thank you to those of you who subscribe. I really do appreciate it. And don't forget, I've got links to other tutorials and other videos below the details on this one. Hopefully I'll see you next time for some more polymer clay fun. That's it for now. Bye.